Ilhan Omar thought she could lecture John Kennedy about American values, but what would happen just minutes later would shock the entire Senate chamber and completely shatter the progressive left. Hit the like button because you're about to witness the most brutal political meltdown in modern history. The fluorescent lights of Senate Hearing Room 216 cast harsh shadows across the polished mahogany table, creating an atmosphere thick with tension and the metallic scent of political warfare. The red recording lights of C-SPAN, CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News blinked like predatory eyes, their unblinking lenses trained on what would become the most watched Senate hearing of the decade. Every major network was broadcasting live, raw and unfiltered, capturing a moment that America would not soon forget. The chamber was packed beyond capacity. Journalists typed furiously on laptops that glowed like torches in the dimmed lighting. Staffers shuffled papers with trembling hands, afraid to make noise in the suffocating silence. Capitol police officers stood rigid by the doors, their hands twitching near their radios as if sensing the explosive potential of what was about to unfold. This wasn't just another routine committee hearing about foreign affairs. This was a reckoning that had been building for months, ever since Ilhan Omar's latest series of anti-American statements had finally pushed the patience of patriotic Americans past the breaking point. Ilhan Omar entered first, flanked by 3 progressive activists who served as her unofficial advisory council, each one more radical than the last. Her black hijab was perfectly arranged, her expression carrying the smug confidence of someone who had made a career out of playing the victim card while simultaneously attacking the very country that had given her refuge, safety, and unprecedented political power. She moved with the calculated precision of a woman who had spent years perfecting the art of manufactured outrage, her designer handbag clutched like a shield against the accountability she knew was coming. Her entourage whispered encouragement in her ear, reminding her of the talking points they had rehearsed for weeks: racism, Islamophobia, white supremacy, the greatest hits of progressive deflection. Across the room, separated by 12 feet of marble floor that might as well have been an ocean, sat Senator John Neely Kennedy from Louisiana. No entourage, no handlers, no army of lawyers or PR specialists. Just a man in a simple navy blue suit that looked like it had been chosen for durability rather than style, with a small American flag pin on his lapel that caught the overhead lights like a beacon of authentic patriotism. But Kennedy wasn't alone. He had something far more powerful than any political machine. Kennedy's weathered hands rested calmly on a manila folder that seemed unremarkable to the casual observer, but would soon prove to contain the ammunition needed to dismantle years of Omar's carefully constructed narrative. His eyes, sharp as a prosecutor's and twice as determined, studied Omar with the intensity of a man who had spent months preparing for this moment. The hearing was officially about oversight of State Department foreign aid distribution, but everyone in the room knew the real subject: Ilhan Omar's pattern of statements that seemed designed to undermine American interests while promoting the agenda of America's enemies. Chairman Mike Johnson called the session to order with a gavel that echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. The committee will come to order. Today we examine concerns about statements made by certain members of Congress regarding American foreign policy and their impact on our national security interests. Omar leaned forward, her microphone crackling to life as she prepared to deliver what she clearly believed would be a devastating opening statement. Her prepared remarks, later leaked to the press, were designed to portray herself as a victim of systemic racism while positioning Kennedy as an ignorant relic of the Old South. "Mr. Chairman," Omar began, her voice carrying the practiced cadence of someone accustomed to dominating conversations through sheer volume and moral posturing, "I find it deeply troubling that we're here today to discuss my constitutionally protected right to free speech while ignoring the real issues facing the American people." She paused for effect, scanning the room with eyes that had been trained to spot cameras and calculate the political impact of every word. The fact that I, a black Muslim woman, am being targeted for expressing concerns about American foreign policy, while white male senators regularly make inflammatory statements without consequence, speaks to the deep-seated racism and Islamophobia that continues to infect our political discourse. Omar thought she had just delivered a knockout punch. She had no idea Kennedy was about to end her. The progressive activists behind Omar nodded approvingly, their phones already buzzing with messages from like-minded organizations preparing to amplify her victim narrative across social media. They had used this playbook countless times before: make outrageous statements, wait for pushback, then claim the pushback itself was evidence of discrimination. But something was different this time. The usual suspects weren't taking the bait. The cameras remained focused, but the energy in the room had shifted. Kennedy hadn't moved, hadn't reacted, hadn't even blinked. He simply sat there, watching Omar with the patience of a hunter who knows his prey is about to walk into a trap. Omar continued her prepared statement, her confidence growing as she fell into the familiar rhythm of grievance politics. The senator from Louisiana represents everything that is wrong with America's approach to foreign policy. He clings to outdated notions of American exceptionalism while refusing to acknowledge the harm our country has caused around the world. She gestured dramatically, her voice rising with practiced indignation. How can we expect to build bridges with the international community when we have senators who view the world through the lens of colonial superiority and refuse to acknowledge America's role in perpetuating global inequality? The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a misfired weapon. Omar had just called Kennedy a colonialist, a racist, and an impediment to American foreign policy. In any other context, such charges might have prompted an immediate defensive response, angry denials, or parliamentary procedures. Kennedy's response was about to shock everyone in that room. Instead, Kennedy simply reached for his manila folder with the slow, deliberate movement of a man who had been waiting years for this exact moment. The gesture was so quiet, so controlled, that it took several seconds for the room to notice. But when they did, the silence became absolute. Kennedy was not a tall man, but something about his bearing as he opened that folder made him seem to fill the entire space around him. His weathered face showed no anger, no embarrassment, no defensive posturing, just the calm certainty of a man who knew exactly what he was about to do. "Miss Omar," Kennedy said quietly, his Louisiana drawl cutting through the crystal-clear acoustics of the chamber like a scalpel through silk. "Might I respond to your observations?" The words were polite, almost deferential, but there was something in his tone that made every person in that room lean forward, something that suggested the simple country lawyer was about to become something else entirely. Omar, momentarily thrown off balance by Kennedy's calm response, tried to regain control of the narrative. "Senator Kennedy, I believe I still have time remaining for my opening statement." "Oh, this won't take long," Kennedy interrupted gently, his hand moving to the documents in his folder with ceremonial precision. "I just wanted to share something with you, something I think you might find educational." The word educational hung in the air like a challenge, but Kennedy wasn't done setting the stage. Kennedy opened the manila folder with the same careful attention a master pianist might give to arranging sheet music before a concert. The papers inside were crisp, official, and meticulously organized. The room watched in fascination as he lifted out a single document. "You see, Ms. Omar," Kennedy said, his voice carrying easily across the silent chamber, "you mentioned American foreign policy and my supposed ignorance of international affairs. You suggested that I represent some kind of outdated thinking that needs to be corrected by your more enlightened perspective." Omar's confidence was beginning to crack. This wasn't how these confrontations were supposed to go. She was supposed to make her accusations, claim victim status, and watch her opponents stumble over themselves trying to avoid being labeled racist or Islamophobic. "Senator, I really think," she began, but Kennedy continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Now, I want to show you something," Kennedy said, holding up the document and angling it so the closest cameras could capture it clearly. "This here is a letter of commendation from the State Department, signed by 3 different secretaries of state, recognizing my work on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in securing crucial Kennedy set the first document aside and picked up a second. "This one's from the Department of Defense, acknowledging my role in negotiations that led to the safe extraction of American hostages from 3 different hostile nations, signed by 4 different defense secretaries, including 2 appointed by Democratic presidents." Omar's face had gone pale. Her prepared talking points about Kennedy's supposed ignorance and colonial mindset were crumbling in real time as he systematically demonstrated expertise that far exceeded her own. But Kennedy wasn't finished. He reached for a third document, this one bound in blue leather with gold lettering that caught the overhead lights. "And this," Kennedy said, his voice taking on the tone of a professor delivering a lesson to a particularly obtuse student, "is my certification from the Harvard Kennedy School's Executive Education Program in International Conflict Resolution, completed in 2019, with highest honors." The progressive activists behind Omar were frantically texting, trying to coordinate a response to information they clearly hadn't expected. Their carefully planned ambush was turning into a masterclass in political preparation. Omar tried to regain her footing. "Senator Kennedy, your credentials don't excuse." "Oh, I'm not done yet," Kennedy interrupted, his tone remaining conversational but his eyes hardening. "You mentioned America's role in global inequality. I assume you're referring to your frequent statements comparing the United States to terrorist organizations, your suggestions that American foreign aid is somehow a form of modern colonialism, and your repeated assertions that America is fundamentally an evil nation. What Kennedy said next would end Omar's career forever. Kennedy reached into his folder and withdrew a thick stack of papers bound with a rubber band. These are transcripts, Ms. Omar. Transcripts of every public statement you've made about America in the past 3 years. Would you like me to read some of them? The color drained completely from Omar's face. She knew exactly what was in those transcripts, and she knew that having them read in their full context without the protective editing of sympathetic media outlets would be devastating. For instance, Kennedy continued, slipping on a pair of reading glasses with theatrical precision, here's what you said at the University of Minnesota last March. America was founded on genocide and built by slavery. Until we acknowledge that we are no different from the terrorist organizations we claim to fight, we will never achieve true justice. The words echoed through the chamber like a confession at a murder trial. Even Omar's supporters shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Comparing America to terrorist organizations was one thing when filtered through friendly media coverage, but hearing it read in the sterile environment of a congressional hearing made it sound exactly as radical as it actually was. Or this one, Kennedy continued, flipping through the pages with the efficiency of a prosecutor who had memorized every piece of evidence. From your speech to the Council on American-Islamic Relations last September, the American dream is a nightmare for anyone who isn't white, Christian, and wealthy. We must fundamentally dismantle the systems that have allowed this racist nation to prosper through the exploitation of people of color around the world. Omar was about to learn why you should never challenge John Kennedy. Omar tried to interrupt. Senator, those statements are being taken out of context. Context. Kennedy's voice sharpened for the first time, cutting through her protest like a blade. Milfers Omar, you're absolutely right. Let me provide the context. Kennedy reached for another document, this one marked with official State Department seals. This is a classified briefing document, now declassified for this hearing, detailing how your statements have been used in recruitment videos by al-Qaeda affiliates in Somalia, your birth country. The silence in the room was deafening. Even the journalists had stopped typing, their hands frozen over keyboards as they processed the implications of what Kennedy had just revealed. Your words, Miss Omar, your exact words comparing America to terrorist organizations have been featured in no fewer than 17 different propaganda videos designed to recruit young Americans to join terrorist cells. The FBI has directly linked your rhetoric to radicalization efforts targeting American citizens. Omar's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. This wasn't supposed to happen. Her statements were protected speech, and any criticism of them was supposed to be dismissed as racism or Islamophobia. The fact that they were being used to recruit terrorists against America was a... Kennedy's next revelation would shake America to its core. Kennedy pulled out what appeared to be a financial document, its pages marked with official Treasury Department stamps. This is a forensic accounting report, completed by the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, tracking the flow of donations to your campaign and political action committees. Omar's legal advisor, a nervous-looking man in an expensive suit, immediately stood up. Mr. Chairman, I object to the introduction of... Sit down, Kennedy said quietly, but with such authority that the lawyer immediately complied. This is a congressional hearing, not a courtroom, and this information has been cleared for public disclosure. Kennedy continued, his voice steady but his words devastating. According to this report, 23% of the funds raised by organizations supporting Ms. Omar's political activities can be traced to shell companies with direct financial ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, and other organizations designated as terrorist groups by the United States government. The admission hit the room like a physical blow. Journalists frantically scribbled notes, their previous skepticism replaced by the dawning realization that they were witnessing the exposure of something far more serious than a routine political disagreement. Furthermore, Kennedy continued, this report details how these same shell companies have funneled approximately $2.3 million to various progressive organizations that have amplified Ms. Omar's anti-American messaging through coordinated social media campaigns. Omar finally found her voice, but it came out as a desperate whisper rather than the confident declarations she was known for. Senator Kennedy, these are serious accusations that require evidence. Kennedy interrupted, holding up another document. This is a sworn affidavit from a former Hamas financier, currently in federal protective custody, detailing how your campaign was specifically targeted for financial support because of your willingness to promote anti-American and anti-Israeli messaging in Congress. But Kennedy wasn't done destroying her. The final blow was coming. Kennedy set the affidavit aside and reached for the final document in his folder, this one sealed in a clear protective sleeve. And this, Miss Omar, this is something I think every American needs to hear. He held up what appeared to be a photograph, but the details weren't immediately visible to the cameras. This is a surveillance photograph, taken by Israeli intelligence and shared with American counterparts, showing you meeting with known Hamas operatives during your 2019 visit to the Middle East, a visit you claimed was purely humanitarian. The room erupted in gasps and furious whispers. Journalists leaned forward in their seats, straining to catch every word. The progressive activist behind Omar began frantically texting, their faces pale with panic as they realized the carefully constructed narrative they had spent years building was crumbling in real time. Omar shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the marble floor like nails on a chalkboard. "That's a lie. I demand you retract that statement immediately." Her voice cracked with desperation, the confident facade she had maintained for years finally shattering under the weight of documented evidence. Her hands shook as she pointed an accusatory finger at Kennedy, but her gesture looked more like a plea than a threat. Kennedy didn't even look up from his papers. His calm demeanor in the face of her outburst only served to highlight the contrast between his measured professionalism and her emotional breakdown. "Miss Omar, you're absolutely right to be concerned about lies. Let me tell you about some lies that really matter." His voice took on a tone that was simultaneously conversational and menacing, like a prosecutor who had been saving his best evidence for last.